Members of the BRICS alliance have criticized U.S. tariffs, saying they threaten global trade. The bloc of developing nations is meeting in Brazil for a two-day summit, but the leaders of China and Russia, two of the bloc's most influential members, are absent. The BRICS nations comprise just over half the world's population and 40% of global economic output. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to add 10% tariffs on any country supporting what he called the BRICS anti-American policies. Well, let's talk more about this with Sanusha Naidu. She's a South African foreign policy analyst and senior research associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, and she joins us from Cape Town. Thanks for being with us. Let's start with Donald Trump's threats against nations supporting what he called the BRICS anti-American policies. Is pressure like that likely to impact the summit?
Well, I think to a large extent, Terry, what it does is that it does bring it back into the room in terms of a conversation. And you've seen that the leaders that are in attendance to the summit right now have raised concerns about what this tariff means in terms of the global economic architecture and the trading architecture, in terms of what the impact that this will have in terms of the way this will underpin commercial interactions and transactions. But in terms of where this goes, I think the fact of the matter is that because it's ventilated as a discussion among the BRICS leaders and is an agenda item on the table of the BRICS summit, suggests that they are looking at ways in which to mitigate the risk. And one of the ways in which they want to mitigate the risk would be to try and have more intra-BRICS trade. Now, that hasn't been really something that they've discussed at length in previous summits. We keep talking about what are the low-hanging fruits for the BRICS right now. And I think one of it is how do they boost that level of inter-BRICS trade? Do they need to have a free trade agreement? Do they need to have some kind of trade strategy that defines what the BRICS do in terms of building up both the resources, the strength, and of course the interoperability of the countries in the BRICS around trading more with themselves, and try to mitigate the risk from Donald Trump is pushing out there in terms of tariffs and escalating tariffs.
Now, Russia and China, big players in BRICS, dominant, I guess one could say. They are also dominating the headlines at this year's summit, even though the leaders of those countries are staying away from the summit. Do other nations, like South Africa, still have much of a voice inside BRICS?
It's very interesting. I think this is the first time a BRICS summit does not have President Xi Jinping. We understand the context in which President Vladimir Putin could not travel to Brazil because of the ICC issue. But again, the challenge here is what are the optics saying about the BRICS? So in a kind of very facetious way, I think you could actually argue that this BRICS summit is actually the IPSA summit, the India, Brazil, South Africa summit, which again is another dynamic within the BRICS that is becoming quite important or being revitalized by India. I think South Africa, with its counterparts in Brazil and India, do continue to play that role, that strategic role of traction, trying to actually argue or trying to actually put together and collate a much more innovation around the dynamic of BRICS, but also I think the dynamic of sub-regional groupings. The BRICS is made up of many sub-regional groupings. The IPSA is one of it. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is another. And so these are dynamics that I think will now start to see that regionalization happen. But I think for right now, the question really is how does India, which has also played a critical role in the BRICS and also finds itself in the shadow of China and constantly pushing back against that shadow, wants to also revitalize the BRICS in a way that makes it more commensurate and measures it towards its own interests, its own kind of articulation around the global governance architecture and reform. And this is where I think the IPSA becomes quite interesting in this summit.
Sanusha, thank you very much. That was Sanusha Naidu of the Institute for Global Dialogue in Cape Town. Thank you.